Hello and welcome to Talking CB and welcome back here to the channel for another video today, guys. What we're going to be doing today is looking at 6 different Barcelona players that I feel desperately need a good season. And by that I mean they need to prove themselves. A lot of these players are the players that we brought in last summer and a few of those the season before that. And the reason for that is I feel that these guys desperately need now to really show us why we signed them. And I think particularly when players join Barcelona, you sort of give them the benefit of the doubt. You know, you say you need a season or so to get to grips with it, the pressure, the different type of system, the way of life in Barcelona, who you become overnight, the different pressures and the hype surrounding you as a person and a player. So I think you always give players at least a season to sort of fashion into that and sort of adapt to the different lifestyle and the playing style of Barcelona. But I think these players have had that now. They've had the time to adapt, they've had the time to sort of gather themselves, and I feel in the coming season they desperately now need to show us exactly why we signed them, what they can produce, and if they can really make it at this level of football. So the 6 players that I'm going to mention are all quite young enough to sort of establish themselves. They're all talented enough to turn things around, but I feel now is the season to do it, because for some of these guys I feel like it's either now or never, because a lot of these guys also were linked with moves away in the current window and they still stayed here. So could this be the last chance they get in the coming season to really announce themselves as Barcelona players? And to kick us off, we're going to go with Lucas Digne, 24-year-old left back, and it's quite a difficult one actually with Lucas Digne because, to be fair to him, he hasn't done an awful lot wrong. He's not a player that's constantly disappointed, he's not a player that's always been exposed at left back, but I still feel like he's got more to give. I still feel like he hasn't done anything which has been overwhelming. He joined in 2016 last summer for 16.5 million euros from Paris Saint-Germain after spending the season on loan at Roma. That transfer fee could rise to around 20 million euros if a number of add-ons are met, but I think last season particularly he didn't get an awful lot of games. He did get a few more games in the first half of the season, but certainly in the second half of the season last season, when Luis Enrique adopted to go a lot of the time with a back three, he had absolutely no chance of playing. There was a lot of times where Lucas Digne wasn't even in the squad last season, and even Jordi Alba, of course, very established left back in our team, even he struggled to get some games last season when we were using that 3 at the back system. So it hasn't been easy for Digne. He hasn't overwhelmed when he's played, he hasn't really excited. So I think this season we're certainly going to see a lot more of him. He's going to play a lot more games, that's for sure. We're going to need him. Jordi Alba is one of those that often does suffer with suspensions and injuries, so we're going to see a bit more of Digne as long as we stay with that 4 at the back system. In that time I feel like he's got to wow us a bit more. He's got to do a little bit more going forward. Defensively I would describe him as solid, which is good for a fullback. Defensively he's quite solid, but I think going forward he's got to give us a bit more. He's got to be a bit more decisive in the final third. The same could be said for Jordi Alba, but I just think Jordi Alba is a bit more dynamic in that final third. He's got the pace to get into those areas, he does make good runs. I think we want to see Lucas Digne being a bit more adventurous when he goes forward, taking a few more risks and possibly then doing a bit better in our team in this system, because I think the fullbacks in our team are so key. So we need the very best we can get when it comes to fullback players, and I think Lucas Digne has just got to go up to a bit of a different level this season. We've got to see a better version of him, and hopefully with the more games he gets a bit more confidence and we see the player that we signed for over 16 million euros, and hopefully he can produce a better campaign. But also the problem for him is, even though he's 24 years old, you're looking over your shoulder a bit, because Marc Cucurella, who's just signed a new contract in the Barcelona B team, he is emerging. He's a really good talent, left back player, really good offensively, and he's also good as well defensively. So I think certainly Digne needs to be looking over his shoulder. Next season, I think the season after this one, Marc Cucurella could really break through. He could have more games, possibly even be promoted to the first team. So I think Lucas Digne really needs to make his mark here and now, or possibly next season you could be looking at Cucu to come up and really start taking some games off him. And the second player that I feel really needs a good campaign and a solid campaign, an injury-free campaign, would be another fullback, ALEIX Vidal. Now the difference with him is he's 28 years old, so you wouldn't say there's an awful lot of time left for Vidal to really make his mark at the club. He joined in 2015, of course, 18 million euros at the time, his transfer cost from Sevilla, and that could rise to around 22 million euros if certain variables are met. But of course ALEIX Vidal joined during our transfer ban, so he had to wait 6 months to make his official debut, and even when he did then, Luis Enrique didn't really seem to fancy him. He opted to go with, of course, Sergio Roberto in the right back area, and he didn't give an awful lot of games to ALEIX Vidal. He's actually only made 17 La Liga appearances in his entire career with Barcelona since 2015. But last season he did enjoy quite a good run of form. Luis Enrique did put a bit more faith in him. He did play him for quite a few successive matches, and ALEIX Vidal quite grew into that quite well. He was good going forward, he scored a few goals in the process, success, but obviously then, you know, he's very, very unlucky. He suffered a broken leg injury against Alaves. It all but ended his season. He didn't make his final appearance until the Copa del Rey final, where he came on as a substitute against Alaves. A nice moment for him. But I think this season is absolutely vital for ALEIX VIDAL, simply because of the way he started this season. He hasn't looked at all convincing, certainly against Real Madrid in the first leg of the Super Cup when we lost 3-1 at the Camp Nou. He didn't look convincing at right back. You know, Ronaldo, Asensio were giving him real problems down that left-hand side. He looked out of sorts. He didn't know where he was supposed to be. He couldn't really keep up. And I think he needs to improve in his defensive game. That's always been the key. Vidal's always been a player who's looked to go on the offensive. He's much, much better when he's going forward. And with that, it's quite interesting because Ernesto Valverde, during the past few games and in pre-season a little bit as well, he did actually experiment with using ALEIX VIDAL as a more advanced player, using him as one of the wingers. Possibly, if we rest MSN, we could play ALEIX VIDAL in his place. But then the problem I have with him is the fact that he's not actually that great in terms of his decision-making in the final third. I would have somebody like Deulofeu over him in those attacking areas. So I think ALEIX VIDAL can be of use this season. I think Nelson Semedo will be our overwhelming favourite in that right-back role. But I think Vidal will get games. He'll get games against possibly the lesser sides at right back when we don't have so much defensive responsibility. I think in those games we're mostly at the Camp Nou, we're on the front foot in the opposition's half. Vidal could be certainly very, very useful because he's good going forward. He's much more comfortable when he's in the opposition's half. But when he's got to defend in those bigger matches against the better opposition, when they're going to come and attack you, Vidal could be exposed defensively there. So I think Semedo is definitely our #1 right back. But in the games that Vidal has this season, he really needs to impress, because just like I said with Lucas Digne, Vidal will be looking over his shoulder, because in the B team, Sergi Valencia, he's the captain of the Barcelona B team, 21 years old now, the right back player, and I really think that he can emerge. Even this season, I would like to see Palencia get a few games in the right back role. So certainly the season after next, I would be thinking Palencia would be ready to get promoted, and that could really mean bad things for ALEIX VIDAL if he doesn't prove himself in the coming campaign. So a very, very big season needed from Vidal. He needs to be much more consistent. He needs to be much, much better defensively, and he needs to show that all in one complete performance. So interesting to see what he can produce in the coming season. Now the third player that I want to discuss is ANDRÉ GOMES, 24 years old. Now a lot has been said about ANDRÉ GOMES since he signed from Valencia last summer. 35 million euros was the initial fee to Valencia, and that could rise to a potential 55 million euros if certain variables are met in the future. But since he's joined the club, there has been a lot of sort of hype surrounding him. He was a player at Valencia that impressed, that certainly against the likes of Real Madrid he did used to produce his A game, but he wasn't consistent. You know, at Valencia he showed flashes of magic, he showed flashes of brilliance from those midfield positions, but he never really was a consistent player, and that's what we've seen at Barcelona so far. He was used a lot by Luis Enrique last season. He did play a lot of games, but he struggled to really stamp his authority on our midfield, and I say that because I feel like he's been used in too many midfield roles. He's been used as sort of replacement for Sergio Busquets in that deeper midfield position. He's been used in Andres Iniesta's role in that creative midfield, and he's also been used to the right of that as trying to be a controlling player, and at times as well he's actually been used as a winger in this team. So where exactly does ANDRÉ GOMES want to play? I think that's what he has to do this season. That is what he must do as soon as he possibly can. Really stamp his authority on one specific midfield role. He needs to make a name for himself in one position. Really identify yourself, what type of player you are, and stick to that. Of course he's happy to play wherever he's put, but I think certainly for his confidence where that is concerned and how he's going to be comfortable in the Barcelona shirt, he needs to really understand the role he's playing. A lot of the time last season he was sent out there by Luis Enrique. He made 30 La Liga appearances, but at times he looked like he didn't know where he was supposed to be, he didn't know what he was supposed to be doing, and I just think this season he needs a clear understanding of what he's got to do, because the ability is there. He's a quality player, he really is, but I think the confidence right now is absolutely shot. The guy has got absolutely no confidence. He doesn't want to go near the ball, he doesn't want the ball, he certainly doesn't want the ball in enclosed areas, he's not coping well under pressure, and I think all of those things right now are making him look like a much worse player than he actually is. There is a good player in there somewhere. We clearly felt that when we paid the big money for him, but we've got to find it, and for that reason ANDRÉ GOMES has got to help himself. He's got to find a position where he's comfortable in, he's got to grow into that, and he's got to really believe in himself that he can succeed here. He's got to believe in his own ability, and he's got to give that in the coming season as often and be as consistent as he possibly can. He was linked with an exit this summer summer. Tottenham showed a little bit of a late interest in him on deadline day. It looked like he might be on his way to the Premier League. I think he would be a player that could actually quite succeed in the Premier League. Certainly his physique, he's quite tall, he's quite strong on the ball. He would certainly be a success in the Premier League, but that didn't materialise. Apparently Barca were going to look to loan him out with a possible option or obligation to buy, but Tottenham wasn't really interested in that obligation after a number of games were played, so it didn't go through. But I think André Gomes has got a big season. I think he will play. I think Valverde will try him out. He will see what he can do, and when he's given those chances, he has to take them, and he really has to develop himself as that midfield player, whatever role he wants to play in the coming season. But he has to do that, and he has to really stamp his authority on this team and show that belief in himself. The fourth player that I would look to would be Denis Suarez, 23 years of age now. We re-signed him from Villarreal for €3.25 million, so he's certainly not an expensive acquisition, but I just think I'll put him in here because I want to see this season Denis Suarez really establish himself. I want to see him really unleash that talent that we desperately know he has. We saw it this summer at the Under-21 Championships with Spain. He was outstanding, and I think that's what we need to see from him. We need to see that belief in himself. We need to see that confidence, and I actually felt quite sorry for him during the previous campaign because he was really quite unlucky. He showed a lot of good potential, he showed a lot of good games, but unfortunately after he had that sort of good game or good period, he either got injured or he wasn't selected by Luis Enrique. He didn't get a lot of consistency in his game. He wasn't able to play in a sustained period, so he was sort of in and out of the team, and it's very, very difficult to get confidence when you do that. It's very, very difficult to really settle down and really show your quality when you're in and out of the team, and sometimes in the stands, sometimes not even in the squad. It's difficult to perform. I think this season Denis Suarez will definitely get more games. He'll definitely have some more consistency, because I think in our squad there's a lot of room for a player like Denis Suarez. I think he's the creative midfielder that he can be, and the other thing as well, of course, he can play wide. So I think that's another thing he has to do there. He needs to decide sort of what his best position is. Is he going to be a creative midfield player? Is he going to try and mould himself into the sort of figure at Andrés Iniesta in our midfield? Is he going to go down that route, or is he going to be more of a wide player? We've seen him quite a few times operate on the wide left position as part of the front three, certainly in pre-season under Ernesto Valverde. That's the sort of position that we saw him in, wide on the left, cutting in and showing his quality, and I think I quite like him in that role. He's got a bit of pace, he's certainly good on the ball, he's good in the dribble, so I think that he can certainly play wide, but he needs to decide what he's going to do. Since he joined the club, he's made 28 La Liga appearances in total, just the 1 goal so far and 4 assists, but I think this season could really be his breakout season. If he can play consistency, if he can show that quality, I really think that Denis Suarez could have a good campaign. He again was linked with an exit this summer. Napoli showed quite a bit of interest in him towards the end of the window. 25 to 30 million euros was being talked about, so clearly the guy has talent. A lot of admirers around the globe are certainly looking at him, but right now he's a Barcelona player, and I think if he can really announce himself, prove himself in the current campaign, he could really go on to be a big player for us, because he's just 23 years old, he's still got a lot more to give, and he's certainly a player that could certainly grow in this team and become a big player in our future if we can just see that quality that we desperately know that he has. The fifth player that I would mention would be RAFINHA, again 24 years old. Like I say, a lot of these players are younger, you know, they do have time to really stamp their authority on this Barcelona team and really grow for the future. That's why a lot of these players, I really do want them to explode. I want them to prove themselves, because they're young enough to really develop into our team as the years go on, and RAFINHA is certainly one of those. He was linked towards the exit door this summer, around 30 million euros Barcelona reportedly put him up for sale for, and I think if anybody had made that offer, Liverpool was linked, a few teams in the Premier League were also keeping an eye on him, Arsenal as well. If an offer had come in for that amount, I think Barcelona might have let him go, but that didn't happen. A lot of clubs were concerned by his current injury. By the way, he is hoping to be back fit within, again, the next few weeks. He should be back amongst the first team. He didn't take part in any of pre-season this summer simply because of that injury that he picked up towards the end of last season, and that's really the point with RAFINHA. I don't really have any worries about his quality, about what he can give to the team. I think he's very versatile in the way that he plays. He can play in the front three, as we've seen many times. He's very similar to Denis Suarez in that effect. You know, he can play within the front three, he can play wide as well. We saw that when we played 3 at the back. RAFINHA was very comfortable playing in a wide midfield role, and he can also play in a central trio. You know, he can play in centre midfield, a more advanced player if he needs to, and I think that versatility can really help us well. So I don't really have any problems with his quality in the team. I think he's a good player. He's technically very good, good on the ball. He's got a bit of pace about him as well, low centre of gravity. I think he's really, really good, and he could be a big player in our team. The only concern that I have with Rafinha is that fitness, and it's quite interesting because we all know that his brother is Thiago, and he's exactly the same. They both have trouble staying fit, staying clear of injuries, and of course it's very difficult for any player to sort of guarantee themselves to stay fit, to stay away from injuries. It's all about sort of luck at the end of the day, but you can still do certain things to sort of try to protect yourself from that, whether Rafinha needs to sort of change his diet or change his sort of training regime, you don't know. You know, I just hope that Rafinha is trying to do everything that he possibly can to have an injury-free season. That is what he definitely needs. He needs a season where he's injury-free, where he can come into the team, where he can stay there, where he can have a consistent period, where he's playing week in, week out, and we can really see his quality. Because I think when he was on loan at Celta under Luis Enrique, you know, you saw the quality week in, week out in La Liga. Luis Enrique then gave him his league debut in 2014. He played his part in the treble-winning season, and he was actually in the following season, you know, 2015, when he was really, really good. He was really developing in that midfield role. I remember a performance against Atletico Madrid where he really took the bull by the horns. He was leading the team in a midfield role, and then against Roma, again, massively bad luck. He suffers a cruciate ligament injury, a bad challenge from Raja Nainggolan. I remember it perfectly. I was so annoyed that day, and he's out for months and months and months. His season is over. So I think he's got to stay injury free. That's the most important thing. Over his time here, he's made 48 Liga appearances, 8 goals, 3 assists. He does contribute in the final third. He can get you goals. He can get you assists when he plays. He does often contribute. So I think certainly Rafinha can be of big use to our squad. I'm glad that we kept him. I think he deserves one more season to really prove himself. And I think this season will be decisive in the career of Rafinha. He could really spiral on. He could shoot upwards. He could really grow as a player. Or if he has a sort of niggly injury season where he's in and out of the team, where he hasn't really got any confidence or consistency, you may well see him have the door next season and leave Barcelona. But I think that would be a sad day if it come, because I really do think he's got potential. He's still only 24 years old, and I still think that he can give a lot to this team, both in midfield and as part of those wide players in the front three. So I really hope that he can do well this season. I hope he gets back to full fitness soon and we can see him back in the team, hopefully making the impact we desperately want to see from him. And the final player that I wanted to discuss in this video, you'd probably guessed who it was going to be: Paco Alcácer. 24 years old, joined last summer like many of the others in this list from Valencia. 30 million euros upfront fee. That could rise to 32 million euros if, again, certain variables are met. But he's a lot like Lucas Digne for me, Paco Alcácer, because he's not done an awful lot wrong. He's not had an awful lot of opportunities in this team. He's not played a lot of games, but when he has played, very seldom has he really set the world alight. He's not really impressed massively in the time that he's had on the pitch. I do think he deserves more minutes. I do think he deserves more of a chance before we can really decide upon him. But I think when he's on the pitch, he has to make more of an impact. He must start doing things that really does wow the Camp Nou crowd, because I think he makes good runs. And that's the thing with Paco, because you don't really want to see him, you know, dribbling 5 players and smashing it into that. You know, we know he's not that kind of player. We know he's not going to produce those kind of moments. But what we do want to see is when he gets a chance that he buries it. That's why we bought him for. That was his reputation at Valencia and for the Spanish national team. He's a poacher. In that box, he's deadly, he's clinical, and I think we want to see that sort of Paco Alcácer emerge once again. That player that's confident in the area, that can take his chances when he gets them, and is clinical. Because I think that's something we desperately need. We do create a lot of chances at Barcelona, and we do miss a lot of chances. So if Alcácer can come into the team and start taking those, being clinical, being the man we can rely on to really take the chances, it could be a very important player for us. And that's the thing. The potential is there for Paco. He is a player that can score goals. He is a player that can be comfortable with our system. I think in the coming season we're going to learn an awful lot about him. I think he can make the runs, he can understand the style, but he needs to start rising to the occasion. He needs to start believing in himself. Much like ANDRÉ Gomes, the quality is there, but in the first half of the season, particularly last season, the confidence was absolutely not there for Alcácer. It felt like it was really getting to him. The occasions were getting to him. He didn't feel like he belonged at Barca. But in the second half of the season, he was slightly better. He had a few more games under his belt. He scored a few more goals. He scored in the Copa del Rey final, of course. 22 La Liga appearances he made last season, 6 goals and 4 assists in that time. That's not a bad return. Not all of those games were starts. He did come off the bench on a number of occasions. So the stats are there, the goals are there, but I think what he needs to start doing is being much more confident. He needs to get involved a bit more. I think a lot of the time, you know, he's standing still, he's trying to make clever movement, but he's got to come deep and receive the ball at times, something that he hasn't always done in his career, but he needs to learn how to do that. He needs to get involved, he needs to put away his chances, and he needs to start making his impact on this team, because of course he's got Luis Suarez ahead of him, but Suarez is 30 years old now. Alcácer needs to grow into the role. He needs to start, you know, really banging banging on the door of Luis Suarez and saying, you know what, I want to be playing the games. That's what he's here for. He's not just here to take up that place on the bench. Alcácer wants to be pushing for the very highest ambitions, and that's what he needs to do. And I think if he can get some goals at the start of the season, if he can start including himself a bit more in the general play of Barcelona, he can be a success here. But it's a massive, massive season for Paco. I think if he doesn't hit the ground running this season, next season we're going to go out and we're going to buy a top quality striker, whether it's somebody like Griezmann, somebody else, because Suarez is not getting any younger now. We need to start thinking about the future. Our centre forward, we've always had, had a great centre forward over the years. Alcácer needs to make his mark, and if he's going to do that, I think this is the season to do it. He needs to do it now, or like a lot of these players, it might be too late. So a lot of these players, guys, you're going to have a lot of opinions on that. I'm very excited to hear what you think about my list of players. You could have included a whole number of players in this list. Arguably all of the new signings coming in this summer, you could have put them on the list. They've all got a point to prove coming in from abroad, but I think the most important thing is the players that have already been here. They've already had a chance to show what they can do, and they haven't done that yet. That's why I put these players on this list. They still have a point to prove. They've had a season to sort of gel, to adapt. Now it's time they prove their quality, and I think for a lot of these players, if they don't do it this season, they may well not be at the club next season. So leave your thoughts down below, guys, on all of these players. Who else would you add to this list? Would you take anyone away from this list? Let me know your thoughts down below. I will see you very, very soon indeed with a lot more videos coming up. Until then, though, as always, Visca el Barça!